Breathe in. Breathe out. G'day, I'm Dr. Karl. Now, did you know that air pollution kills over 7 million people each year? And more than 4.5 billion people are exposed to particulate air pollution levels that are double what the World Health Organization says are safe. Coal-fired power stations are one major source of air pollution around the world, but the industry doesn't do much about the problems that it causes. For example, in New South Wales, just counting sulphur pollution, coal-fired power stations pay only about 2% of the health costs that they cause. What gives? It's relatively easy to measure what comes out of a chimney or smokestack, but it's much harder to work out exactly where the bad stuff that gets into your lungs has come from. That's because there are, of course, other sources of air pollution. And because so many cities and sources of pollution are close together, it's difficult to know what's coming from where. And on top of that, chemicals and particles in the air interact with each other and the weather. It's a mess. You can see why it's tricky stuff to calculate. But it turns out that New South Wales is one of the best places in the world to do this kind of research. The state has one major populated area, running from Wollongong to Newcastle along the coast and west to Muswellbrook and Lithgow. It also has only 5 major sources of the gas sulphur dioxide. Yup, you guessed it, all coal-fired power stations. Dr. Ben Ewald from the Centre for Clinical Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the University of Newcastle has been looking into sulphur dioxide emissions from coal-fired power stations in New South Wales. And he's been looking into their associated human health costs. And just so you know, there are plenty of other nasties dumped by coal-fired power stations, including nitrogen dioxide, microscopic particulate matter, mercury, fluoride, and believe it or not, some radioactives. That's right. Coal-fired power stations dump thousands of times more radioactive metals than a nuclear-fired power station, thanks to the radioactive material present in the coal. But Dr. Ewald just focused on the sulphur. When you burn coal, the carbon turns into carbon dioxide, and the sulphur turns into sulphur dioxide. In New South Wales, about 250,000 tonnes of sulphur dioxide comes out of the smokestacks of the coal-fired power stations every year. We know that sulphur dioxide irritates people's airways and has even been proven to trigger asthma attacks in children. And when it gets into the atmosphere, sulphur dioxide slowly turns into sulfate particles, which also have well-documented bad health effects. So what are the power stations doing about it? Well, this sulphur dioxide could be caught by scrubbers, which would remove it from the emissions before it's released into the atmosphere. But no New South Wales coal-fired power station uses sulphur dioxide scrubbers. Instead, in New South Wales, the power stations can get away with just paying a pollution fee. In the case of sulphur dioxide, the fee is 4.3 cents for every megawatt hour of electricity generated, which, when you think about it, is a tiny fraction of the current wholesale price of electricity, $88 per megawatt hour. And it doesn't go anywhere near covering the health cost of sulphur dioxide pollution. The direct health cost is conservatively estimated to be 45 times bigger than the pollution fee, about $1.92 per megawatt hour. So 4.3 cents just doesn't really cut it. Looking at the health data, using scrubbers to remove sulphur dioxide from coal-fired power station emissions could save 104 lives each year in New South Wales and could save $102 million for the state in hospital and health costs. Aside from scrubbers, another alternative is moving away from coal power. many nations are actually embracing clean energy. In 2017, the amount of electricity generated by renewables in Europe was greater than the amount coming from coal. And in the UK, between 2006 and 17, the amount of coal-generated electricity fell from 40% to only 7%. That's huge. On top of that, electricity generated from oil dropped by 2/3, nuclear dropped slightly, and gas stayed roughly the same. Massive increases in wind and solar covered the shortfall. If the value of coal's hidden health costs was factored into electricity prices, coal-fired power would be much less affordable. And maybe that would be the first step to everybody breathing a little easier.